Take that off, bitch. Judge Harold Kessler pointed his finger straight at the woman in scrubs, sitting quietly in the back row. His voice cracked like a whip across the courtroom. Every head turned, every breath stopped. He slammed his gavel so hard the sound echoed off the walls. I said, take that medal off right now, or I will hold you in contempt. The woman didn't flinch. She didn't cry. She looked him dead in the eyes and said 5 words that would change everything. It is authorized, Your Honor. What Judge Kessler didn't know, what nobody in that courtroom knew, was that the woman he just publicly humiliated was one of the most decorated combat veterans in United States history. And someone very powerful had just heard every word he said. If this story moves you, I invite you to subscribe to our channel and follow this story all the way to the end. Drop a comment and tell me what city you're watching from. I want to see just how far this story travels. The phone rang at 6:14 in the morning. Emma Colton was already awake. She had been awake since 4, the way she always was. The way her body had trained itself after years of never knowing when the next explosion would come. She sat on the edge of her bed in a small apartment just outside of Norfolk, Virginia, her hands wrapped around a cup of black coffee that had already gone cold. She picked up the phone. Hello? Emma, it's me. The voice on the other end was rough, strained, like someone trying to hold themselves together and failing. They arrested Danny last night. He's in county lockup right now. Emma set the coffee down slowly. Who arrested him? Norfolk PD. They say he attacked someone outside a bar. Emma, you know Danny. You know he wouldn't do that. Not unless something set him off. Not unless... I know, Emma said quietly. I know exactly what happened. The woman on the phone was Maria Ruiz, Danny's older sister. She had been calling Emma every few months for the past 3 years, sometimes just to check in, sometimes because Danny had another episode, sometimes because she didn't know who else to call. Emma always picked up, every single time. His arraignment is this morning, Maria said, her voice breaking. 9 o'clock. I can't be there, Emma. I'm in Texas with Mom. She's in the hospital again, and I can't leave her. I don't know what to do. He's got nobody. Emma closed her eyes. She could hear the panic in Maria's voice, the desperation of a woman trying to hold her entire family together from 1,000 miles away. She thought about Danny. She thought about the last time she saw him, sitting alone in a VA waiting room, staring at the floor, his hands shaking so badly he couldn't fill out the intake form. I'll be there, Emma said. Emma, you don't have to. Maria, I'll be there. She hung up. She sat still for a long moment. Then she stood, walked to her closet, and pulled out her scrubs. She had a 12-hour shift starting at 7, but she called the hospital and told them she needed a personal day. The charge nurse on the other end sighed. Emma had never once called in sick in 4 years. Not once. She didn't explain why. She didn't need to. She got dressed. She looked at herself in the mirror. A 46-year-old woman with tired eyes and steady hands. No makeup. Hair pulled back tight. She reached into the top drawer of her dresser and pulled out a small velvet box. Inside was a pale blue ribbon attached to a star-shaped medal. She held it in her palm for a moment, feeling its weight, then pinned it carefully to the front of her scrubs, just above her heart. She hadn't worn it in years, not since the ceremony, not since the day they told her she was a hero, and she told them she was just doing her job. But today was different. Today she wasn't wearing it for herself. She drove to the Norfolk County Courthouse in her old Honda Civic, the one with 200,000 miles on it and a dent in the passenger door she never bothered to fix. She parked in the public lot, fed the meter 4 quarters, and walked inside. The courthouse was already busy. Lawyers in suits moved through the hallways carrying stacks of files. Families sat on wooden benches looking lost, or angry, or scared. A security guard waved Emma through the metal detector without a second glance. She was just another woman in scrubs. Nobody special, nobody worth noticing. She found courtroom B and slipped inside, taking a seat in the last row on the left side. The room was half full. A few defense attorneys huddled together near the front. A clerk shuffled papers at her desk. Two bailiffs stood near the side door, arms crossed, looking bored. And there at the bench sat Judge Harold Kessler. Emma had never met him. She didn't know his reputation. She didn't know that the attorneys in Norfolk called him the Hammer behind his back. Not because he was tough on crime, but because he enjoyed it. She didn't know that 3 public defenders had filed formal complaints against him in the last 2 years for abusive conduct. She didn't know that he once made a 19-year-old girl cry on the stand and then told her to grow up in front of her family. She didn't know any of that, but she was about to find out. The first case was called a man in his 20s charged with petty theft. His public defender barely got 2 sentences out before Kessler cut him off. "Is your client guilty or not, counselor? I don't have all day." The attorney stammered. "Your Honor, we'd like to request." "Denied. How does your client plead?" "Not guilty, Your Honor." Kessler leaned back in his chair and stared at the young man like he was something stuck to the bottom of his shoe. "Trial date set for March 15th. Next case." That was it. 30 seconds. No discussion. No consideration. Just a man with a gavel and an attitude, moving people through his courtroom like cattle through a chute. Emma watched. She said nothing. She folded her hands in her lap and waited. The second case was a DUI. Kessler spent less than a minute on it. The third was a domestic disturbance. He spent even less. Each time the pattern was the same. He interrupted. He dismissed. He controlled every word spoken in that room with the precision of someone who had confused authority with power. And then they called Danny's name. Case number 7421. The People versus Daniel Ruiz. Charge, aggravated assault. Emma sat up straight. A side door opened, and Danny walked in, flanked by a bailiff. He was wearing an orange jumpsuit that was too big for him. His wrists were cuffed in front. His hair was uncombed. He had a bruise on his left cheekbone and a cut above his right eye. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. But Emma recognized him instantly, even after 3 years, even through the bruises and the exhaustion and the weight he had lost. She recognized the way he held his shoulders, slightly forward, slightly braced, the posture of a man who had spent too many years expecting the next hit. She recognized his eyes, dark, alert, scanning the room the way he used to scan the horizon line in Helmand Province. Danny Ruiz, Sergeant First Class, United States Marine Corps, retired. 2 tours in Afghanistan, 1 Purple Heart, 1 traumatic brain injury, 1 honorable discharge, and now 1 pair of handcuffs. He didn't see Emma. He kept his eyes forward, the way he had been trained. He stood at the defense table next to a young public defender who looked like she had graduated from law school about 15 minutes ago. She was flipping through a thin file with shaking hands. Kessler looked down at Danny and didn't see a veteran. He didn't see a Marine. He saw a name on a docket and a man in an orange jumpsuit, and that was enough for him. "Mr. Ruiz, you are charged with aggravated assault. How do you plead?" The public defender stood. "Your Honor, my client pleads not guilty. We would also like to request a reduction in bail. Mr. Ruiz is a veteran of the United States Marine Corps with no prior criminal record. He is not a flight risk and—" "A veteran?" Kessler said, his voice dripping with something that sounded a lot like contempt. "Every other defendant in my courtroom is a veteran these days. That doesn't give you a free pass to assault people, counselor." The public defender's face flushed. "Your Honor, I wasn't suggesting—" "Bail stands at $50,000. Next case." "Your Honor, please, Mr. Ruiz cannot afford—" "I said next case." Danny stood still. He didn't argue. He didn't react. He just lowered his head slightly, the way a man does when he's used to being told he doesn't matter. And that was when Kessler noticed Emma. It wasn't her face he noticed. It wasn't her scrubs. It was the medal. The pale blue ribbon and the small gold star pinned to her chest caught the overhead light for just a moment, and Kessler's eyes locked onto it the way a predator locks onto movement. He stopped mid-sentence. He squinted. He leaned forward in his chair and pointed directly at Emma. "You, in the back row, stand up." Every person in the courtroom turned to look at her. Emma stood slowly, her hands at her sides. "What is that on your chest?" Kessler demanded. "A medal, Your Honor," Emma said evenly. "I can see it's a medal." "What medal?" "The Medal of Honor, Your Honor." A murmur rippled through the courtroom. A few heads turned back toward the judge. The clerk looked up from her papers. One of the bailiffs uncrossed his arms. Kessler's face twisted into something ugly. His lips curled. His eyes narrowed. He looked at Emma the way a man looks at someone he has already decided to punish. "The Medal of Honor," he repeated, his voice thick with disbelief. "You expect me to believe that you, a nurse, received the Medal of Honor?" "I don't expect anything, Your Honor. I'm simply answering your question." "Take it off." The words landed like a slap. The courtroom went silent. Not quiet, silent. The kind of silence that happens when everyone in a room collectively holds their breath. Emma didn't move. "Your Honor, the medal is authorized. I am legally permitted to wear it." Kessler slammed his gavel so hard the base cracked. "I said take that off. Right now. I will not have stolen valor displayed in my courtroom. That medal is a disgrace on someone like you." Someone like you. The words hung in the air. Everyone heard them. Everyone understood what they meant. A woman. A nurse. Someone who didn't look like what a hero was supposed to look like. Emma's jaw tightened, but her voice remained steady. "With all due respect, Your Honor, I earned this medal in a combat zone, and I have every legal right to wear it." "You earned nothing," Kessler spat. "You are a liar, and you are making a mockery of this court. Bailiff, if she does not remove that medal in the next 30 seconds, arrest her for contempt." The bailiff nearest to Emma shifted uncomfortably. He looked at the judge. He looked at Emma. He looked at the medal. Something in his face changed. A flicker of recognition, maybe, or just the instinct of a man who had served and knew what that ribbon meant. He didn't move. "Bailiff," Kessler barked, "did you hear me?" "Your Honor," the bailiff said carefully, "I believe that may actually be—" "I don't care what you believe. I gave you an order." The bailiff took one step toward Emma. She looked at him calmly, and there was something in her eyes that stopped him cold. Not anger, not fear, something deeper, something earned in a place he had never been. He stopped. The courtroom door opened. Everyone turned. The hinges groaned the way old courtroom doors do, slow and heavy, and through the gap stepped a man in a full Navy dress uniform. The ribbons on his chest covered the entire left side of his jacket. His shoulders carried 4 stars. His back was straight. His jaw was set. His shoes clicked against the marble floor with the kind of measured authority that doesn't need to announce itself. He walked down the center aisle without looking left or right. He didn't hurry. He didn't slow down. He moved the way a man moves when he has seen things that would break most people and decided that they wouldn't break him. He stopped in the middle of the aisle, turned to face Emma, and said one word: "Iron Widow." Emma closed her eyes for just a moment. When she opened them, she nodded once. "Admiral." The man turned to face the bench. "Your Honor, my name is Rear Admiral Thomas Callahan, United States Navy, Special Warfare Command." Kessler opened his mouth. Nothing came out. "The woman you just ordered to remove her medal," the Admiral continued, "is Chief Petty Officer Emma Colton, retired, Navy Nurse Corps, attached to SEAL Team 4 during Operation Enduring Freedom. She was awarded the Medal of Honor by the President of the United States for actions above and beyond the call of duty during an ambush in Helmand Province, Afghanistan, in which she personally carried 3 wounded Marines, including Sergeant Daniel Ruiz, across 400 meters of open ground under continuous enemy fire. He paused. He let the silence do its work. She killed 2 enemy combatants with a sidearm while shielding a wounded man with her own body. She sustained 3 gunshot wounds and continued to render aid until every last Marine in her care was evacuated. She nearly died on a medevac helicopter because she refused treatment until her patients were stabilized first. The Admiral took one more step toward the bench. His voice dropped lower, harder, the kind of voice that doesn't need volume to carry weight. That medal she is wearing, Your Honor, is not stolen. It was paid for in blood, her blood, and the blood of the men she saved, one of whom is standing right there in handcuffs in your courtroom. He pointed at Danny Ruiz. Danny's head snapped up. His eyes found Emma for the first time. And in that moment, every wall he had built around himself, every layer of numbness and silence and survival, cracked wide open. His lips moved. No sound came out at first. Then, barely above a whisper, "Iron Widow?" Emma looked at him. She didn't smile. She didn't cry. She just nodded, the way she had nodded at him 10 years ago on a blood-soaked stretcher when he begged her not to let him die, and she told him she wouldn't. "I told you I'd always come back, Danny." The public defender dropped her file. Papers scattered across the floor. She didn't pick them up. She stood frozen, looking between Emma and Danny and the Admiral, trying to comprehend what was unfolding in front of her. Kessler gripped the edge of his bench. His knuckles were white. His face had gone from red to gray. The gavel sat beside him, useless now, a prop for a man who had just lost control of his own stage. He opened his mouth to speak, but the Admiral wasn't finished. "Your Honor, I was not planning to attend this hearing today. I was notified 30 minutes ago by a former member of my team that Chief Petty Officer Colton was in this courtroom and that she was being publicly humiliated by a judge who didn't bother to ask a single question before making accusations." Callahan's eyes locked onto Kessler's, and they didn't let go. "I have testified before Congress. I have briefed 4 presidents. I have buried men and women who gave everything they had for this country, and in all my years of service, I have never, not once, witnessed a display of disrespect as shameful as what I just walked in on." A woman in the gallery started crying. She wasn't the only one. "I drove here from the Pentagon," Callahan continued, "in traffic, because some things cannot wait. And defending the honor of someone who once defended mine is one of them." He turned back to Emma. His voice softened for the first time. "Chief, you don't have to take that medal off for anyone. Not today. Not ever." Emma's chin lifted slightly. "I know, sir." The Admiral almost smiled. Almost. "That's the Iron Widow I remember." He turned back to Kessler one final time. "Your Honor, I strongly suggest you reconsider how you've handled this morning. Not just this case, but every case you've treated with this level of carelessness. Because I promise you, the people in this room will remember what happened here today. And so will I." He didn't wait for a response. He stepped to the side of the aisle and stood at parade rest, his hands clasped behind his back, his eyes forward, his presence filling the room with the kind of authority that doesn't come from a title or a bench or a gavel. It comes from service, it comes from sacrifice, and it comes from knowing with absolute certainty that the woman standing in the back row of that courtroom had earned every single thing she was wearing. Kessler sat behind his bench, and for the first time in his career, he had nothing to say. The courtroom waited. Danny Ruiz stood at the defense table with tears running down his face, looking at the woman who had carried him out of hell and driven across town in her old Honda Civic to make sure he didn't go through another one alone. And Emma Colton stood exactly where she had been standing since the moment she walked in. Quiet, steady, unbroken. The gavel sat untouched. The clock on the wall ticked. And every single person in Courtroom B understood that they had just witnessed something they would carry with them for the rest of their lives. The clock on the wall read 9:27. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The only sound in courtroom B was the low hum of the fluorescent lights overhead and the quiet, uneven breathing of Danny Ruiz, who was still standing at the defense table with tears streaming down his face. Judge Kessler sat behind his bench like a man who had just been punched in the chest. His mouth opened, then closed, then opened again. He looked at the Admiral. He looked at Emma. He looked at the bailiff who had refused to follow his order. And for the first time in what the attorneys of Norfolk County estimated to be over 15 years, Harold Kessler did not know what to say. The public defender, a young woman named Sarah Chen, was the first to move. She bent down and started picking up the papers she had dropped, her hands trembling so badly that the pages rattled like dry leaves. She gathered them against her chest and straightened up, looking at Danny with new eyes. She had been assigned his case 45 minutes ago. She had skimmed the file in the hallway. She knew nothing about him except his name, his charge, and his inability to post bail. Now she was standing next to a man who had been carried out of a war zone by a Medal of Honor recipient, and she didn't know what to do with that information. Danny hadn't stopped looking at Emma. His wrists were still cuffed. His bruised face was wet. He kept blinking, like a man trying to convince himself that what he was seeing was real. "Emma," he said, "just her name, just that." She nodded. "Sit down, Danny. We're not done here." He sat, not because she outranked him, not because she ordered him. He sat because when Emma Colton told you to do something, you did it. Because the last time she told him to do something, it was, "Stay awake, Marine," and he was bleeding from 3 places, and she was the only reason he was still alive. Admiral Callahan remained standing in the aisle, his posture unchanged, his eyes still fixed on the bench. He wasn't making a scene. He didn't need to. His presence alone was the scene. Every ribbon on his chest told a story, and every story ended the same way. This man had earned the right to stand wherever he wanted. Kessler finally found his voice. It came out smaller than anyone in that room had ever heard it. "Admiral Callahan, I appreciate your service, but this is my courtroom, and I will not be—" "Your Honor," Callahan didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "I am not here to tell you how to run your courtroom. I am here because one of the finest human beings I have ever known was just called a liar and publicly degraded in a place that is supposed to represent justice. I have said what I came to say. What you do next is entirely up to you." Kessler swallowed hard. His hand moved toward the gavel, then stopped. He looked out at the gallery. 30 faces stared back at him. Some were angry, some were crying. A man in the second row, mid-60s, wearing a faded Marine Corps baseball cap, was shaking his head slowly back and forth, his jaw tight, his eyes burning with the kind of controlled fury that only comes from a man who has served and watched someone disrespect that service. "Your Honor," Sarah Chen said, and her voice surprised even herself because it came out steady. "In light of what has just been revealed, I would like to formally request that bail be reconsidered for my client, Sergeant Daniel Ruiz, United States Marine Corps, retired." Kessler looked at her. She didn't look away. "Your Honor, my client served 2 combat tours in Afghanistan. He received the Purple Heart. He sustained a traumatic brain injury during an ambush that nearly killed him. He has been struggling with post-traumatic stress disorder for over a decade, and the VA has failed him at every turn. The incident that brought him here last night was not an act of aggression. It was a crisis response triggered by a situation that his mind could not distinguish from combat." She paused. She looked down at her file, then closed it. She didn't need it anymore. The man he allegedly assaulted was a stranger at a bar who came up behind him and grabbed his shoulder. Sergeant Ruiz reacted the way his training and his trauma taught him to react. He didn't start a fight. His nervous system did. And instead of getting him help, instead of recognizing what was happening, the police arrested him, put him in a cell, and left him there for 12 hours without so much as a phone call. Kessler's face changed. Not a lot, just enough for the people watching closely to see something shift behind his eyes. Whether it was guilt or embarrassment or something else entirely, no one could be sure. The woman sitting in the back of your courtroom, Sarah continued, drove here this morning because she received a phone call from my client's sister, who is 1,000 miles away caring for their dying mother. Chief Petty Officer Colton is the only person who showed up for Daniel Ruiz today. She came here on her day off, wearing her Medal of Honor, not to show off, not to make a statement, but because she wanted this court to understand that the man standing before you in handcuffs is not a criminal. He is a casualty of war, and he deserves better than what he has received so far. From the system and from this bench. The words landed. They landed hard. Sarah's hands were shaking again, but she didn't sit down. She stood there, 5'3", 28 years old, holding her ground in front of a judge who had made grown men stammer. Callahan glanced at her, the faintest nod. Approval from a man who didn't give it easily. Danny stared at the table in front of him. He was gripping the edge so hard his knuckles had turned white. He was trying not to break. He was trying so hard not to break, but the walls were crumbling and he could feel it happening. He could feel 10 years of silence pushing against the back of his throat, demanding to be heard. Kessler looked at Danny, really looked at him. Maybe for the first time that morning, he actually saw the man in front of him. The bruises, the shadows under his eyes, the way his shoulders hunched forward like a man bracing for impact, the way his cuffed hands trembled against the table. "Sergeant Ruiz," Kessler said. Danny looked up. "Is what the Admiral said true? Were you in Helmand Province?" Danny's throat worked. "Yes, sir." "And this woman, Chief Petty Officer Colton, she saved your life?" Danny turned his head and looked at Emma. She was still standing in the back row, her hands at her sides, the Medal of Honor catching the light on her chest. She didn't smile. She didn't nod. She just looked at him the way she always had, like he mattered, like he had always mattered. "She did more than save my life, sir," Danny said, and his voice cracked on the last word. "She gave it back to me." The woman who had been crying in the gallery pressed her hand to her mouth. The man in the Marine Corps cap lowered his head. The clerk at her desk stopped typing and looked at Danny with tears in her eyes. "I was 22 years old," Danny continued. He didn't ask permission to speak. He didn't wait for the judge to tell him it was okay. The words just came, the way water comes when a dam finally breaks. "I was 22 and I thought I was invincible. We all did. You have to think that way or you can't do the job. And then the ambush hit and everything went sideways in about 3 seconds. I took a round in my left leg and another one in my shoulder and I went down. I couldn't move. I couldn't see. All I could hear was gunfire and guys screaming, and I remember thinking, this is it. This is how I die. In the dirt. Alone." He stopped. He breathed. The courtroom waited. And then she was there. I don't know how. I don't know where she came from. One second I was alone, and the next second she was right there, dragging me, and she was yelling at me, not comforting me, not telling me it was going to be okay. She was yelling. She said, "You don't get to die today, Marine. Not on my watch. You hear me?" And I heard her. Through all of it, I heard her. Danny wiped his face with his cuffed hands. She carried me all the way, 400 meters, and she was hit too. I didn't know that until later. She was bleeding and she never said a word about it. She just kept going. She kept going until she got me to the evac point. And when the helicopter came, she made them take me first. She made them take all of us first. The medic told me later that she almost bled out on the ground because she wouldn't let them touch her until every single one of us was loaded. He looked at Kessler. "That woman that you called a liar, sir, that woman you told to take off her medal, she is the reason I'm breathing right now. She is the reason I got to see my mother again. She is the reason I got to hold my niece when she was born. Every day I've had since that day belongs to her." The courtroom was silent. Completely, devastatingly silent. Kessler removed his glasses. He set them on the bench. He pressed his fingers to his eyes and held them there for a long moment. When he looked up, his face was different. Not softer, exactly, but stripped, like someone had pulled away a mask, and what was underneath wasn't anger at all. It was something much more human than that. "Chief Petty Officer Colton," Kessler said. Emma looked at him. "Your Honor, I owe you an apology." The words hung in the air. From a man like Kessler, those 5 words cost more than anyone watching could calculate. This was a man who had built his entire career on never being wrong, never backing down, never admitting weakness. And here he was, in front of 30 witnesses, saying the words that every person in that room needed to hear. "What I said to you was inexcusable. What I assumed about you was wrong. I let my own judgment cloud the truth, and in doing so, I disrespected not only you, but every person who has ever worn a uniform and served this country." Emma nodded once. "Accepted, Your Honor." That was it. 2 words. She didn't gloat, she didn't lecture, she didn't throw it back in his face. She accepted the apology the same way she had accepted the insult, with a stillness that made everyone around her feel like they were standing on shifting ground. Kessler turned back to the defense table. "Miss Chen, Your Honor, I am reducing Sergeant Ruiz's bail to personal recognizance. He will be released today." Sarah's knees nearly buckled. "Thank you, Your Honor. I am also ordering a full review of the arrest report and requesting that the VA provide an immediate mental health evaluation for Sergeant Ruiz. If the prosecution wants to proceed with charges, they can do so, but they will have to convince me that this man belongs in a cell and not in a treatment program." He paused. "And I am revoking the contempt order I was about to issue." He looked at Emma one final time. "Chief Petty Officer Colton, you are free to wear your medal in my courtroom, today and any other day." Emma said nothing. She simply sat down. The bailiff, who had been ordered to approach her earlier, walked over quietly. He leaned down and said something that only she could hear. She looked up at him, and for the first time all morning, her expression changed. Not a smile, something gentler, something that passed between 2 people who understood each other without explanation. The bailiff straightened up and returned to his post. Later, when someone asked him what he had said to her, he would shake his head and say, "That's between me and the chief." Danny was processed for release within the hour. They removed his handcuffs at 10:45. He stood at the defense table, rubbing his wrists, looking around the courtroom like a man emerging from a dark room into bright light. Sarah Chen gathered her things beside him, already making notes about the next steps. She had walked into this courtroom with a throwaway case and was walking out with something that felt a lot like a calling. Admiral Callahan waited in the hallway. When Danny came through the double doors, the Admiral extended his hand. Danny took it. The handshake lasted longer than protocol required. "You holding up, son?" Callahan asked. Danny's jaw tightened. "Some days are harder than others, sir." "I know they are. That's not going to change. But it gets manageable. You hear me? It gets manageable." Danny nodded. He didn't trust himself to say more. Callahan reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a business card. "This is the direct line for the SEAL Family Foundation's Veteran Support Program. You call that number tomorrow morning. Not next week. Not when you get around to it. Tomorrow morning. They're expecting you." Danny took the card. He held it carefully, the way a drowning man holds a piece of driftwood. "And Danny," Callahan's voice dropped, "she drove across town for you today. Don't waste that. You understand what I'm telling you?" "Yes, sir." Callahan squeezed his shoulder once, then turned and walked down the hallway toward the exit. His shoes clicked against the marble the same way they had when he entered, measured and deliberate. The stride of a man who had done what he came to do and didn't need to stay for the applause. Emma was the last to leave the courtroom. She walked out through the double doors and found Danny standing in the hallway, alone now, holding the Admiral's card in one hand and a clear plastic bag containing his personal belongings in the other. He turned when he heard her footsteps. They stood about 10 feet apart. Neither of them spoke right away. The hallway was emptying. A janitor pushed a mop bucket past them without looking up. The sounds of the courthouse, doors closing, phones ringing, shoes on hard floors, filled the space between them. "You didn't have to come," Danny said finally. "Yeah, I did." "How did you even know?" "Maria called me." Danny closed his eyes. "She shouldn't have called you. You've done enough for me, Emma. More than enough. You've done more than anyone should ever have to do for someone else." Emma took a step closer. "Danny, look at me." He opened his eyes. "You remember what I said to you on that stretcher?" "Which time?" "The second time, when you tried to tell me to leave you." His jaw trembled. "You said you don't leave people behind." "That's right, and I meant it then, and I mean it now. This isn't Afghanistan, and you're not bleeding out in the dirt. But you're in trouble, and you need help, and I'm not going to walk away from that. Not today, not ever." Danny pressed his lips together hard. He turned his head to the side and stared at the wall because if he looked at her right now, he was going to lose it completely, and he had already lost it once today in front of a room full of strangers. "I'm a mess, Emma," he whispered. "I'm a complete mess. I can't sleep. I can't hold a job. I hear a car backfire and I'm back in Helmand. 3 years ago, you told me to go to the VA, and I went. And you know what they did? They put me on a waiting list. 4 months. I waited 4 months for an appointment, and when I finally got one, the doctor spent 11 minutes with me and wrote me a prescription and sent me on my way. 11 minutes. That's what my service was worth. 11 minutes. "I know," Emma said. "I know how broken the system is. I see it every day. I work with veterans at the hospital who can't get appointments, who can't get medication, who can't get anyone to listen. But that's why I'm here. Because the system failed you, and I won't." She reached into the pocket of her scrubs and pulled out a folded piece of paper. She held it out to him. "What's this?" Danny asked. "It's the name and number of a doctor at the Naval Medical Center in Portsmouth. His name is Dr. James Whitfield. He specializes in TBI and PTSD in combat veterans. He's good, Danny. He's one of the best, and he's already expecting your call." Danny took the paper. He unfolded it slowly. He read the name. He read the number. And then he folded it back up and held it against his chest like it was something precious. "You already called him," Danny said. It wasn't a question. "I called him at 6:30 this morning, before I drove here. He said he can see you this week." Danny's face crumpled. He turned away completely now, one hand over his mouth, the other still clutching the paper. His shoulders shook. He was a man who had survived firefights and explosions and 10 years of nightmares, and he was coming undone in a courthouse hallway because a woman in scrubs had made a phone call for him at 6:30 in the morning. Emma waited. She didn't touch him. She didn't tell him it was okay. She just stood there, steady and patient, the way she always was, the way she had always been, and let him feel what he needed to feel. When he turned back, his eyes were red, but his breathing was even. "Thank you," he said. "Don't thank me, just show up. That's all I'm asking. Show up for yourself the way you showed up for your country." He nodded. He put the paper in his pocket, right next to the Admiral's card. They walked out of the courthouse together. The morning sun was bright and the parking lot was full, and somewhere across town, Emma's shift at the hospital was going on without her. She thought about the patients she should have been checking on. She thought about the medications she should have been administering. She thought about the charge nurse who was probably irritated that she had called out. And then she thought about Danny Ruiz, walking beside her, free, breathing, alive. And she knew that this was exactly where she was supposed to be. They reached her Honda Civic. Danny looked at it and almost laughed. "You still drive this thing?" "It runs. It ran 10 years ago too, barely. It got me here." Danny put his hand on the roof of the car. He stared at it for a long moment. "Emma, what happened in there? With the judge, what he said to you. How can you just let that go? She looked at him over the roof of the car. Because it doesn't matter what he called me, Danny. I know who I am. I've always known. The people who matter know. And the people who don't know, they'll figure it out or they won't. Either way, it doesn't change what happened. It doesn't change what we went through, and it doesn't change why I'm here. She unlocked the car. Get in. I'm buying you breakfast, and then we're going to figure this out, together. Danny stood there for another moment, his hands still on the roof, the sun warm on his face, the weight of the morning pressing against his chest. And then he got in the car. Emma started the engine. It coughed once, caught, and settled into its familiar rattle. She pulled out of the parking lot and turned east, toward the waterfront, toward the diner she used to go to after long shifts, the one with the good coffee and the waitress who never rushed you. Danny sat beside her, quiet, watching the city move past through the passenger window with a dent he had probably noticed but didn't mention. Neither of them spoke. They didn't need to. Some silences are empty. This one was full of everything they had survived, everything they had lost, and everything they were still fighting for. The Medal of Honor caught the sunlight through the windshield and flashed once, briefly, before the road curved and the light shifted. Emma drove on. The diner was half empty when they walked in. Emma picked a booth near the back, the same one she always sat in, the one where she could see both exits. Old habits. Danny slid into the opposite side and didn't even glance at the menu. He just sat there, staring at his hands on the table, turning them over slowly like he was checking to make sure they were still his. A waitress came by. Emma ordered 2 coffees and 2 plates of eggs and toast without asking Danny what he wanted. He didn't argue. He hadn't eaten since yesterday afternoon, and even that had only been a bag of chips from a gas station. The coffee arrived. Danny wrapped both hands around the mug and held it the way Emma had held hers that morning. Not drinking, just holding. Like the warmth was the only thing keeping him tethered. "Tell me what happened last night," Emma said. Not gently, not carefully, direct, the way you talk to someone when you respect them too much to tiptoe. Danny stared into the coffee. "I went to a bar." "Which one?" "Kelly's, on Granby Street." "You been there before?" "A few times. It's quiet." Or it was. He took a breath. "I was sitting at the bar, by myself. I'd had 2 beers. That's it. 2. I wasn't looking for trouble, Emma. I swear to God I wasn't." "I believe you. Keep going." There was a group of guys near the pool table. College kids, loud. I didn't care. I was just trying to sit there and not think for a couple hours. That's all I wanted. Just a couple hours where my brain wasn't on fire. His grip tightened on the mug. One of them came up behind me. I didn't see him coming. He grabbed my shoulder. Hard. Like full hand, squeezing. And He stopped. His jaw locked. Emma could see the muscles in his neck working, the tendons pulling tight under the skin. "Danny." I don't remember the next part. His voice dropped to almost nothing. "I know that sounds like a lie. I know it sounds like what every guy says when he doesn't want to admit what he did. But I'm telling you the truth." 1 second his hand was on my shoulder, and the next second I was on the ground, and 2 cops were on top of me, and the kid was bleeding, and I didn't know where I was. I didn't know what year it was. I thought I was back there, Emma. I thought I was in Helmand, and someone had grabbed me, and my body did what it was trained to do. Emma nodded slowly. She didn't flinch. She didn't look away. She had heard this story before, not from Danny, but from dozens of veterans at the hospital. Different names, different bars, different triggers, but always the same broken wiring. The brain that couldn't tell the difference between a college kid's hand and an enemy combatant's grip. The nervous system that stayed at war long after the body came home. "How bad was the kid hurt?" she asked. "Broken nose. That's what the cops told me. I don't even remember hitting him." "Did anyone at the bar tell the police what happened? That he grabbed you first?" Danny laughed, but it wasn't laughter. It was the sound of someone who had stopped expecting things to go his way. Nobody said anything. The bartender told the cops I just attacked the kid out of nowhere. Unprovoked. That's the word they used in the report. Unprovoked. Was there security footage? Danny looked up. I don't know. Nobody mentioned it. Emma pulled out her phone. What's the name of the bartender? I don't know. Some guy. Mid-30s maybe. Tattoo on his forearm. I'll find out. She was already typing, already moving, already doing what Emma Colton did, which was solve problems while everyone else was still trying to understand them. Sarah Chen is your attorney. She's young, but she's sharp. I saw it in there today. She'll push for the footage. Emma, I can't afford an attorney. I can't even afford the gas to get to court. Sarah's a public defender. She's free. And the gas isn't your problem right now. Your problem is getting healthy. Everything else we figure out one step at a time. The food arrived. Emma ate. Danny didn't touch his plate for a long time. He just kept turning the coffee mug in his hands, round and round, the way he used to spin his dog tags when he was nervous. Can I ask you something? Danny said. Yeah. Why do you still care? Emma set down her fork. She looked at him with an expression that was hard to read. Not angry, not sad, something more complicated than either of those things. You really want to know? Yeah, I do. Because I've been asking myself that question for 10 years, and I never come up with an answer that makes sense. You saved my life. That's done. That's over. You got your medal. You got your recognition. You could have walked away and never thought about me again. Nobody would have blamed you. So why are you here, Emma? Why are you sitting in a diner buying me eggs when you should be at work? Emma was quiet for a moment. Then she reached up and unpinned the Medal of Honor from her scrubs. She set it on the table between them, the blue ribbon bright against the scratched formica. You see this? Yeah. They gave me this for one day out of my entire life, 14 minutes of combat. That's what the official citation says, 14 minutes. And they turned those 14 minutes into a ceremony and a handshake with the president and a medal that I keep in a drawer because most days I can't stand to look at it. Danny stared at her. What are you talking about? I'm talking about the part they don't put in the citation, Danny. I'm talking about the part where I carried you out of that ambush and loaded you onto a helicopter and then collapsed in the dirt and woke up 3 days later in a hospital in Germany with tubes in my arms and a doctor telling me that one of the 3 Marines I carried didn't make it. The air between them changed. Danny's face went white. What? Corporal Marcus Webb. He was 20 years old. I carried him 200 meters with a bullet in my hip, and I got him to the evac point, and they put him on the helicopter, and he died 40 minutes later in surgery. Internal bleeding. They couldn't stop it. Danny's hands went flat on the table. I didn't know that. Nobody ever told me that. Because I asked them not to. I asked the command to keep it out of the reports. I asked them to let his family grieve without knowing that the person who carried him out couldn't save him in the end. Her voice didn't waver. It stayed level, controlled, the way it always did. But there was something underneath it now, something that had been buried for a long time and was only just reaching the surface. I got the Medal of Honor for saving 3 Marines. But one of them died, Danny. Do you understand what that means? Every time I look at this medal, I don't see a hero. I see Marcus Webb. I see his face. I see the way he looked at me when I told him to hold on, and the way he tried to smile, and the way his hand went limp in mine right before they loaded him on the bird. Danny couldn't speak. He was staring at her, and everything he thought he knew about that day was rearranging itself inside his head. So you want to know why I'm here? Emma said. I'm here because I couldn't save Marcus. I carry that every single day, and I will carry it until the day I die. But you, Danny, you I saved. You're alive. You're sitting across from me right now, and I will be damned if I let the country we both bled for chew you up and spit you out like you don't matter. She picked up the medal and pinned it back on her scrubs. That's why I'm here, not because I'm a hero, because I'm not finished. Danny Ruiz put his head in his hands and wept. Not the silent tears he had shed in the courtroom. Real, body-shaking, decade-overdue weeping. The kind that comes from a place so deep you didn't even know it existed until someone cracked it open with the truth. The waitress came by, saw what was happening, and walked away without a word. The cook glanced through the window and looked away. The other two customers in the diner studied their plates with sudden interest. Nobody interrupted. Nobody stared. Sometimes people just know when to leave a moment alone. It took Danny 4 full minutes to pull himself together. When he lifted his head, his eyes were swollen and his face was blotched, and he looked like a man who had just been turned inside out. But something in him had shifted. Something heavy had moved, not gone, but moved. And for the first time in years, there was just a fraction more space in his chest to breathe. I didn't know about Marcus, he said hoarsely. Emma, I'm so sorry. Don't be sorry, be here. That's all I'm asking. He nodded. He picked up his fork. He took a bite of eggs that had gone cold and chewed slowly, deliberately, like a man relearning how to do something he had forgotten. Emma's phone buzzed. She glanced at it. Her expression changed instantly, sharpening into something alert and focused. What is it? Danny asked. It's Sarah Chen, your attorney. Emma read the message, then read it again. She says the prosecutor's office just contacted her. They're offering a plea deal. Misdemeanor assault, 6 months probation, no jail time. Danny set down his fork. That was fast. Too fast. Emma's eyes narrowed. They're trying to close this before anyone starts asking questions about what happened at that bar. Before anyone pulls the security footage. Before anyone finds out that the kid who grabbed you has 2 prior assault charges of his own. Danny blinked. What? Emma turned the phone toward him. Sarah pulled his record. The kid you allegedly attacked, Tyler Brennan, age 23, 2 prior arrests for assault, 1 dismissed, 1 pled down. His father is a city councilman. The information landed like a grenade. Danny stared at the phone, reading the text once, twice, 3 times, his mind trying to process what it meant. His father is a city councilman, Danny repeated slowly. Patrick Brennan, District 4. He's on the Public Safety Committee. He has direct relationships with the police department, the DA's office, and half the judges in Norfolk County. Danny leaned back. So that's why the bartender lied. That's what it looks like. And that's why the cops didn't look for footage. That's what it looks like. And Kessler, the bail, $50,000 for a first-time offender with no record. That wasn't just him being a jerk, was it? Emma put her phone down. I don't know, but Sarah is going to find out. Danny's jaw clenched. The sadness that had been pouring out of him 2 minutes ago was already hardening into something else. Not anger, not yet, but the raw material of anger, the kind that comes when a man who has given everything for his country realizes that the system he trusted has been rigged against him by a 23-year-old kid's politician father. They wanted me to plead out, Danny said. They wanted me to take the deal, get a misdemeanor on my record, and disappear. And nobody would ever know that the kid started it. Nobody would ever know his daddy made it go away. That's the play, Emma confirmed. And if the Admiral hadn't shown up, if you hadn't been there, I'd be sitting in a cell right now with a $50,000 bail I couldn't post, waiting for a public defender I'd met for 5 minutes to convince me that a plea deal was my best option. Yes, Danny closed his eyes. When he opened them, something in them had changed. The defeated man who had shuffled into that courtroom in an orange jumpsuit was gone. In his place was someone harder, clearer, more awake than he had been in years. I'm not taking the deal, Danny said. Good. I want the footage. I want the truth. And I want that kid's father to answer for what he did. Emma picked up her coffee. It wasn't Sarah. It was a number she didn't recognize. she answered. Chief Petty Officer Colton? Speaking. My name is Robert Harmon. I'm a reporter with the Virginian Pilot. I'm calling because I received a tip about what happened in Judge Kessler's courtroom this morning. I understand a decorated veteran was publicly humiliated by the judge and that a Navy Admiral intervened. Can you confirm that? Emma looked at Danny. He looked back at her. Neither of them had expected this. Not this fast. Who gave you this tip? Emma asked. I can't disclose my source, ma'am, but I can tell you that this story is going to run regardless. I'd rather have your side of it. Emma held the phone away from her ear for a moment. She could feel the weight of the decision pressing against her. She had spent her entire life avoiding attention. She had asked the Navy to keep her name out of the press after the ceremony. She had declined every interview request. She had turned down a book deal. She had done everything she could to stay invisible, because for her the mission was never about recognition. It was about the work. But this wasn't about her anymore. This was about Danny. This was about a system that had failed him and a politician who had tried to bury him. And sometimes staying invisible wasn't an option. Mr. Harmon, she said, I'll give you a statement, but I have conditions. Name them. This story isn't about me. It's about a Marine veteran who was wrongly arrested and denied due process because a city councilman wanted to protect his son. If you write it that way, I'll talk to you. If you turn it into some kind of hero worship piece about the Medal of Honor, I'll hang up right now and you'll never hear from me again. There was a pause on the other end. Fair enough. Can we meet? Tomorrow, I'll call you with a time and place. She hung up. Danny was watching her. You sure about this? No, Emma said honestly, but I'm sure about you. And right now that's enough. She left a 20 on the table. They walked out of the diner into the midday sun. It was 11:45. Less than 6 hours ago, Emma had been sitting on the edge of her bed in the dark, holding a cold cup of coffee, thinking it was going to be an ordinary day. Nothing about this day was ordinary. She drove Danny to his apartment, a studio on the second floor of a building that had seen better decades. He got out of the car, then leaned back through the open window. Emma? Yeah? The call sign, Iron Widow. You know why they gave it to you, right? She looked straight ahead. Because I kept going after everyone else stopped. No, Danny shook his head. Because you were terrifying. In the best possible way. The guys used to say that if the enemy saw you coming, they should run. Not because you were big or loud or mean. Because you were unstoppable. Because nothing, not bullets, not blood, not orders, nothing could make you leave someone behind. Emma's hands tightened on the steering wheel. She didn't respond right away. When she did, her voice was quieter than Danny had ever heard it. Marcus Webb didn't think I was unstoppable. Marcus Webb would have told you to stop punishing yourself, and you know it. She turned her head and looked at him. For just a moment, one brief, unguarded moment, the Iron Widow was gone, and all that was left was Emma. A woman carrying a weight she had never set down. A woman who had saved lives and lost one, and spent every day since trying to make up for something that was never her fault. Call Dr. Whitfield tomorrow, she said. First thing. I will. And call the Admiral's number, the foundation. They'll help with housing, with legal costs, with everything. I will. And Danny? Yeah? Eat something tonight, something real, not chips from a gas station. He almost smiled. Almost. Yes, ma'am. He stepped back from the car. Emma pulled away from the curb. She watched him in the rearview mirror as he walked toward the building entrance. His steps a little steadier than they had been that morning, his shoulders a little less hunched. She drove 3 blocks before she had to pull over. She put the car in park. She pressed her forehead against the steering wheel, and she let herself feel, just for a minute, the full weight of everything she carried. Marcus Webb's face, Danny's tears, the judge's voice saying, "Someone like you." The Admiral calling her name in a courtroom full of strangers. The reporter's phone call, the councilman's son, the broken system, the cold coffee, the 4 a.m. wake-ups, the nightmares she never told anyone about. All of it. She breathed. She counted to 10. She straightened up. She put the car in drive. Emma Colton had been to war. She had bled in the dirt. She had carried men twice her size across open ground while bullets tore the air around her. She had lost a patient on a helicopter and received a medal she never asked for, and built a life so quiet that most people who knew her had no idea what she had done. And now, for the first time in 10 years, the world was about to find out. Her phone lit up on the passenger seat, another unknown number. She didn't answer it. 2 minutes later, it lit up again. Different number. Then again. By the time she reached the hospital parking lot, she had 7 missed calls from numbers she didn't recognize. She sat in the car and stared at the phone as it buzzed an 8th time. Someone had talked. Someone in that courtroom had pulled out their phone, typed a few sentences, and sent them into the world. And now the world wanted to know who the Iron Widow was. Emma picked up the phone. She turned it off. She dropped it in her bag, got out of the car, and walked into the hospital to start the second half of her shift. She had patients to care for. She had IVs to check, and medications to administer, and charts to update. She had a job to do. The same job she had done every day for 4 years. The same job she would do tomorrow and the day after that. Because Emma Colton did not stop working just because the ground was shaking underneath her. The medal was still pinned to her scrubs. She didn't take it off. By 6 o'clock that evening, the story had already spread further than anyone could have predicted. Emma didn't know it yet because her phone was still off, sitting at the bottom of her bag in her locker while she finished the last 2 hours of her shift. But outside the walls of Norfolk General Hospital, the world was moving fast. Sarah Chen found out first. She was sitting in her tiny office at the Public Defender's Building, eating a cold sandwich and reviewing Danny's case file for the 3rd time, when her colleague Marcus poked his head through the door. "Hey, Chen, you were in Kessler's courtroom this morning, right?" "Yeah, why?" "Check Twitter." Sarah pulled up the app on her phone. The first result nearly made her choke on her sandwich. Someone in the courtroom gallery had recorded audio on their phone. Not video, just audio. 17 seconds of it, starting from the moment Kessler said, "Take that off," and ending right after Emma said, "It is authorized, Your Honor." The clip had been posted to Twitter at 11:15 that morning by an anonymous account. By noon, it had 10,000 retweets. By 3 o'clock, 50,000. By 6, it was trending nationally under a hashtag that someone had created from the story's title. Sarah put down her sandwich. She picked up her desk phone and called Danny. He answered on the 4th ring. "Hello? Danny, it's Sarah Chen, your attorney. Have you been online today?" "No, I don't really do social media." "Okay, I need you to listen carefully. Someone recorded what happened in the courtroom this morning and posted it online. It's gone viral. There are reporters calling the public defender's office asking about you and about Chief Petty Officer Colton. I've already gotten 3 calls from news stations." Danny was silent for a long moment. "How viral are we talking?" "National news viral. CNN picked it up an hour ago. Fox is running it on their evening broadcast. The Virginian pilot has a story going live tonight." "That's the reporter who called Emma." "Robert Harmon, yes. He's running a piece tonight at 8. Danny, I need to know, do you want to talk to the press?" "No." "Okay, that's fine. You don't have to. But here's what you need to understand. This kind of attention can go 2 ways. It can help your case, or it can complicate it. Right now, the public is on your side, on Emma's side. The audio clip is damning for Kessler. People are furious. But if Patrick Brennan's people get out in front of this and spin it, the narrative could shift. Danny's voice hardened. "Spin it how?" "They could paint you as unstable, violent. They could say Emma's presence was a stunt. They could lean into the assault charge and make it look like the veteran card is being played for sympathy. I've seen it before, Danny. These people have resources, and they know how to use them. What do you want me to do? Nothing yet. Don't talk to anyone. Don't post anything. Don't answer calls from numbers you don't recognize. Let me handle this. I'm going to push for the security footage from Kelly's bar first thing tomorrow morning. If that footage shows what I think it shows, this case falls apart, and Brennan's got nothing. And if the footage is gone? Sarah paused. It was the right question, the smart question, the question of a man who had learned not to trust systems that were supposed to protect him. Then we find another way, she said, but let's cross that bridge when we get to it. She hung up and immediately dialed Emma's number. It went straight to voicemail. She tried again. Same thing. At 7:30, Emma walked out of Norfolk General after finishing her shift. She was exhausted. Her feet ached. She had spent the last 8 hours doing what she always did, changing bandages, monitoring vitals, comforting a 70-year-old man who was scared about his upcoming heart surgery, holding the hand of a woman whose husband had just been moved to the ICU. Normal things, important things, the things that reminded her why she became a nurse in the first place. She reached into her bag and turned on her phone. It took 30 seconds to power up. When it did, the notifications cascaded in like a waterfall. 23 missed calls, 41 text messages, 14 voicemails. Her phone vibrated continuously for almost a full minute as everything loaded. Emma stood in the parking lot and scrolled through the messages. Maria Ruiz had texted 4 times. Sarah Chen had called 6 times. Admiral Callahan had sent 1 text, just 3 words. Call me, urgent. 3 different numbers she didn't recognize had left voicemails. And there, buried in the avalanche, was a text from a coworker at the hospital. Emma, are you the woman in the courtroom video? It's everywhere. Call me. Emma opened Twitter. She didn't have an account, but she didn't need one. The audio clip was on the front page of every news site in America. She tapped play and heard her own voice, thin and compressed through a phone speaker, but unmistakable, saying 5 words to a judge who had just tried to strip her of her honor. She closed the app. She leaned against her car. She pressed her hand over her eyes and breathed. This was exactly what she had spent 10 years avoiding. This was the spotlight she had refused at every turn, the attention she had declined, the story she had kept locked away in a drawer along with the medal. And now, it was out. Not because she had chosen to tell it, but because someone in a courtroom had held up their phone at the right moment, and the world had decided it wanted to listen. She called Callahan first. He answered immediately. Emma. Admiral, I just saw it. I know, listen to me carefully. This is going to get bigger before it gets smaller. I've already received calls from 3 members of Congress and the Secretary of the Navy's office. The story has legs, Emma. The public is angry about what Kessler did, and they're going to want answers. I don't want to be a story, sir. I know you don't, but you are one. And the question now isn't whether the story gets told. It's who tells it. If you stay silent, other people will fill in the blanks. Reporters, commentators, politicians, everybody with an opinion and a microphone. Some of them will get it right. Most of them won't. Emma was quiet. She knew he was right. She hated that he was right. There's something else, Callahan said. I made some calls this afternoon about Patrick Brennan. The councilman? Yes, Emma, this goes deeper than you think. Brennan's son Tyler has been in trouble before. Twice arrested, twice the charges disappeared. Both times the arresting officers were pressured to drop the cases. Both times the DA's office conveniently lost interest. There's a pattern here, and Danny isn't the first person to get caught in it. Emma's grip tightened on the phone. Who told you this? A friend at NCIS, off the record. He's been watching Brennan for a while. Not for this, for something else, something bigger. But Danny's case just kicked the door open. What do you mean, something bigger? I can't say more right now, not on the phone, but I need you to trust me. Can you do that? I've always trusted you, sir. Good. Then do two things for me. First, call Sarah Chen. She needs to know what I just told you. Second, talk to the reporter. Harmon, give him your statement tomorrow, but be careful what you say. Tell the truth about what happened in that courtroom and nothing more. Don't mention Brennan yet. Let Sarah handle that side of it through proper channels. Understood. And Emma, one more thing. Sir, I'm proud of you. What you did today, showing up for that kid, that took more courage than anything I've ever seen on a battlefield. Don't let anyone tell you different. She hung up. Watched people come and go, nurses and watched people come and go, nurses and doctors and orderlies and janitors, all of them carrying their own weights, their own stories, their own invisible medals. At 8:15, she called Sarah Chen. Sarah answered before the first ring finished. Emma, thank God, I've been trying to reach you all day. I know, I was working. My phone was off. Have you seen the news? I've seen enough. The Admiral just called me. He told me about Brennan, about the pattern. Sarah's voice dropped. He told you about the other cases? He told me Brennan's son has been protected before, that charges have been dropped, that there's a pattern of interference. It's worse than that, Emma. Sarah's voice was tight now, controlled, but barely. I spent the last 4 hours pulling records. Tyler Brennan's first arrest was 2 years ago. Bar fight. The victim was a 28-year-old man named Kevin Marsh. Broken jaw. Kevin filed a police report, identified Tyler, and the case was assigned to a detective in Norfolk PD's Violent Crimes Unit. 3 weeks later, the case was closed. Insufficient evidence. Even though there were 4 witnesses and a security camera. And the second arrest? Last year, Tyler grabbed a woman outside a nightclub. She fought back. He shoved her into a wall. She called the police. Tyler was arrested, booked, and released within 2 hours. The woman filed for a restraining order. It was denied. The assault charge was pled down to disorderly conduct, and Tyler paid a $500 fine. Emma closed her eyes. The woman, what happened to her? She moved out of Norfolk 3 months later. I tracked down her new address this afternoon. She's in Richmond now. I called her. And? Sarah's voice wavered for the first time. She cried, Emma. She cried for 10 minutes before she could talk. She said nobody believed her. She said the police made her feel like she was the one who did something wrong. She said Brennan's people contacted her after the arrest and offered her money to drop the complaint. When she refused, her landlord suddenly didn't want to renew her lease. Her employer got a call from someone at City Hall asking questions about her work performance. She lost her apartment and nearly lost her job. And that's when she decided to leave. Emma's jaw locked. They ran her out of town. That's what it looks like. Her name is Jessica Torres. She's 26 years old, and she told me she'd be willing to testify if Danny's case goes to trial. The weight of it settled over Emma like a second skin. This wasn't just about Danny anymore. It wasn't just about a bar fight or a broken nose or a judge with a temper. This was about a man with political power using that power to protect his son from the consequences of his actions, over and over, crushing anyone who got in the way. Sarah, the security footage from Kelly's bar, how do we get it? I filed a subpoena request this afternoon, but here's the problem. The bar is owned by a company called Granby Holdings, LLC. I ran the corporate filings. Granby Holdings is registered to an attorney named David Park. David Park's biggest client is Patrick Brennan. Emma went cold. Brennan owns the bar. Through a shell company, yes. Which means the bartender who told the cops that Danny attacked Tyler unprovoked isn't just a witness. He's an employee of the man whose son, Danny, allegedly assaulted. That's not a witness. That's a puppet. And the footage? If it still exists, it proves Danny's version of events. If Brennan's people have already erased it, that's destruction of evidence, and that's a felony. Either way, we win. Either way, we have leverage. But Emma, I need to be honest with you. This is going to get ugly. Brennan is not going to sit back and let this happen. He has money, connections, and a very strong motivation to make this go away. When he finds out we're digging, he's going to push back. Hard. Let him push. Sarah paused. You know what you sound like right now? What? Like someone who's been waiting 10 years for the right fight. Emma didn't respond to that. She didn't need to. They both knew it was true. She drove home. The apartment was dark when she walked in. She didn't turn on the lights. She kicked off her shoes, dropped her bag on the kitchen counter, and stood in the middle of her living room with her eyes closed. Her phone buzzed. She looked at it. It was Danny. I saw the news, he said. It's on every channel. I know. They're showing your picture, the one from the Medal of Honor ceremony. You look about 10 years younger. I was 10 years younger. Emma, people are posting about me too, about the case, about what happened in the courtroom. Someone set up one of those online fundraiser things for my legal defense. Emma, it's already at $40,000. She pulled the phone away from her ear and stared at it. 40,000? In 6 hours. Sarah told me about it an hour ago, and it was at 12,000. I just checked again, and it's at 40. Emma sat down on the edge of her couch. $40,000. Raised by strangers. For a man they had never met, whose story they had heard through a 17-second audio clip and a handful of news reports. People are good, Danny, she said quietly. Most of them. When they see something wrong, they want to fix it. That's what's happening right now. What do I do with it? You let Sarah manage it. Every penny goes to your defense. And when this is over, whatever's left goes to other veterans who can't afford attorneys. Deal? Deal. There was a pause. Then Danny said, I called Dr. Whitfield. Emma straightened. Already? You told me to call first thing. It's not first thing yet, but I couldn't wait. I left a message with his service. They said he'd call me back in the morning. Good. That's good, Danny. And I called the Admiral's number, the SEAL Family Foundation. I talked to a woman named Linda. She was really kind, Emma. She said they'd help with everything. Legal, housing, counseling, job placement. She said I wasn't alone. His voice broke on the last word. Nobody said that to me in a long time. Well, it's true, and you're going to hear it a lot more from now on. Another pause. Longer this time. Emma could hear Danny breathing on the other end. Steady, deliberate, the way you breathe when you're trying to hold yourself together. I need to tell you something, Danny said. About last night, about the bar. There's something I didn't tell you at the diner. Emma's instincts fired. What? Before the kid grabbed me, before any of it happened, I was sitting at that bar thinking about ending it. The words hit Emma like a wall. She stopped breathing. Her hand gripped the phone so hard her knuckles went white. Danny, I wasn't going to do it. I don't think I was going to do it, but I was thinking about it, sitting there, staring at my beer, doing the math in my head. Who would miss me? Who would notice? How long it would take before anybody even knew? Danny, listen to me. I'm not done. Let me finish. I was sitting there thinking those thoughts, and then that kid grabbed my shoulder, and my body did what it did, and the cops came, and I went to jail, and I spent 12 hours in a cell thinking that this was it. This was the bottom. This was the lowest I could go. And then Maria called you, and you showed up. You showed up, Emma, in your scrubs with your medal and your old Honda, and you showed up. He took a shaking breath. And I need you to know that you didn't just save me in that courtroom today. You didn't just save me from the judge or the charges or any of that. You saved me from myself. Again. The same way you did 10 years ago. And I don't know how to thank someone for that. I don't know if there are words big enough. Emma pressed her hand over her mouth. She was sitting in the dark in her apartment, tears running down her face for the first time in years, listening to the man she had carried across 400 meters of hell tell her that she had carried him again today without even knowing it. Danny, she said when she could trust her voice, tomorrow morning you call Dr. Whitfield. That's not a request. That's an order from your chief. You hear me? I hear you. And you answer when I call. Every time. I don't care if it's 4 in the morning. I don't care if you're tired or angry or having a bad day. You answer the phone. I will. And Danny, you're going to be okay. Not today, maybe not tomorrow, but you're going to be okay. Because you survived a war, and you survived a broken system, and you survived last night and this morning, and you're still here. You're still fighting. That means something. That means everything. He was quiet for a long time. Then, so softly she almost missed it, he said, Iron Widow. Yeah? You saved me 3 times now. Don't make it 4. I'm going to handle it from here. She almost smiled. Almost. I'll believe that when I see it, Marine. She hung up. She set the phone on the couch beside her. She sat in the dark for a long time, letting the silence fill the space around her, letting the tears dry on her face, letting her heart rate come back down to something approaching normal. At 10:15, her phone buzzed one last time. It was a text from Sarah Chen. Subpoena for security footage granted. Judge Morrison signed it 20 minutes ago. We pick up the footage tomorrow at 9. If it's been deleted, I'm filing a motion for evidence tampering and adding Patrick Brennan as a person of interest. Also, the fundraiser just hit $62,000. And Emma, one more thing. A woman named Jessica Torres called me back. She's driving down from Richmond tomorrow. She wants to tell her story. She said, and I quote, "It's time somebody stopped that family." Emma read the message twice. She set the phone down. She stood up, walked to her bedroom, and opened the top drawer of her dresser. She took out the velvet box that held her Medal of Honor. She opened it and looked at the pale blue ribbon and the gold star. The same decoration that had started everything that morning. The same 5-pointed piece of metal that a judge had called a disgrace, and an admiral had called sacred, and a broken Marine had called the reason he was still alive. She closed the box. She put it back in the drawer. Tomorrow she would pin it on again. Tomorrow she would walk into whatever storm was coming with the same steady hands and the same quiet strength that had carried her through everything else. But tonight she sat on the edge of her bed in the dark, the same way she had sat that morning at 4 a.m., and she let herself be just Emma, not the Iron Widow, not the Medal of Honor recipient, not the hero or the nurse or the advocate, just a woman who was tired and scared and brave all at the same time, doing the only thing she knew how to do, showing up, again and again and again, no matter what it cost her. The clock on her nightstand read 10:32. Somewhere across town, Danny Ruiz was lying on his mattress staring at the ceiling, holding a folded piece of paper with a doctor's phone number in one hand and an admiral's business card in the other, breathing in and breathing out and telling himself that tomorrow would be different. Somewhere in Richmond, Jessica Torres was packing an overnight bag with shaking hands, preparing to drive 3 hours south to face the family that had driven her from her home. Somewhere in a newsroom, Robert Harmon was putting the final edits on a story that would run on the front page of tomorrow's Virginian Pilot. And somewhere in a house in Norfolk's wealthiest neighborhood, Patrick Brennan was on the phone with his attorney, his voice low and furious, asking how a 17-second audio clip had turned his quiet little arrangement into a national scandal. None of them slept well that night, but all of them knew, with absolute certainty, that what had started in Courtroom B that morning was far from over. Sarah Chen arrived at Kelly's bar at 8:55 the next morning with a subpoena in her hand and a Norfolk County Sheriff's deputy at her side. The bar was closed. The front door was locked. She knocked 3 times. Nobody answered. She knocked again. "This is Sarah Chen, attorney with the Norfolk Public Defender's Office. I have a court-ordered subpoena for your security footage. Open the door." Nothing. The deputy stepped forward. "Ma'am, I can call for a locksmith if—" The door opened. The bartender from 2 nights ago stood in the gap, mid-30s, tattoo on his forearm, just like Danny had described. His eyes were bloodshot. He looked like he hadn't slept. "I know why you're here," he said. Sarah held up the subpoena. "Then you know I need the footage from Tuesday night. Every camera, 9 p.m. to midnight." The bartender didn't take the paper. He stared at it like it was a lit fuse. "There's a problem." Sarah's stomach dropped. "What kind of problem?" "I got a call last night from my boss. He told me to wipe the system." The deputy's hand moved to his belt. Sarah held up her palm to keep him still. "Did you wipe it?" The bartender looked at her. He looked at the deputy. He looked down at his own hands, and something in his face shifted. The same look Emma had seen on the bailiff in the courtroom. The look of a man deciding which side of his own conscience he wanted to live on. "No," he said. "I didn't wipe it." Sarah exhaled. "Can I have it?" "I'll do you one better." He stepped aside and held the door open. "I'll show you exactly what happened. Because what I told the cops that night was a lie, and I've been sick about it ever since." His name was Chris Mallory. He was 34 years old. He had been bartending at Kelly's for 3 years. He knew who owned the bar. He knew about the shell company. He knew that when Patrick Brennan's son walked in, you poured his drinks for free and looked the other way when he got rough. That was the deal. That was how you kept your job. But Chris Mallory also had a brother who served in Iraq. A brother who came home different. A brother who flinched at loud noises and couldn't hold a job and spent 2 years sleeping in his car before the VA finally got him into a program. And when Chris watched the news the night before and saw what happened in that courtroom, when he heard the audio clip and learned that the man he had lied about was a decorated Marine veteran, something inside him broke. He pulled up the footage on the bar's security system. 4 cameras, full color, clear audio. Sarah watched in silence as the screen showed exactly what Danny had described. Danny sitting alone at the bar, Tyler Brennan walking up behind him. Tyler's hand grabbing Danny's shoulder hard, pulling him backward off the stool. Danny's reflexive response, instantaneous, violent, over in less than 3 seconds. And then Tyler on the floor, holding his nose, and Danny standing over him with a look on his face that wasn't rage. It was terror, pure animal terror. The look of a man who didn't know where he was. "That's it," Chris said quietly. "The kid grabbed him. Your client reacted. It was self-defense. And when the cops got here, Tyler's buddy called his dad, and 20 minutes later I got a phone call telling me exactly what to say." Sarah turned to the deputy. "I need this footage preserved as evidence immediately. All 4 cameras, time-stamped and logged." "Yes, ma'am." She turned back to Chris. "Are you willing to testify to what you just told me?" Chris rubbed the tattoo on his forearm. It was an eagle, globe, and anchor. Marine Corps, just like his brother. "Yeah," he said. "I'll testify." Sarah called Emma at 9:32. Emma was in her car, already driving. She had taken another personal day, the second in a row, something she had never done in her life. "We got it," Sarah said. "The footage is intact. It shows everything. Tyler grabbed Danny first. Danny reacted in self-defense. And the bartender is flipping. He's willing to testify that Brennan's people told him to lie to the police." Emma gripped the steering wheel. "What about the footage deletion order?" Chris Mallory received a phone call at 11:47 last night from David Park, Brennan's attorney, instructing him to wipe the security system. Chris didn't do it, but the call itself is evidence of obstruction. "I'm filing a motion this morning to add Patrick Brennan and David Park as subjects in a criminal investigation. How fast can you move?" "I've already called the DA's office. They're scrambling. They know this is a disaster for them." The original prosecutor on Danny's case, a guy named Mitchell Hayes, he's the one who offered the plea deal yesterday. I called him this morning and told him about the footage. He went quiet for about 10 seconds and then said he needed to talk to his supervisor. That means he knew. That means he's scared, and scared prosecutors make mistakes. Emma pulled into the parking lot of the Virginian pilot's offices. Robert Harmon was waiting for her near the entrance, a tall man in his 50s with gray at his temples and a press badge clipped to his jacket. He extended his hand when she approached. "Chief Petty Officer Colton, thank you for coming." "Let's make this quick," Emma said. "I have somewhere to be." They sat in a conference room. Harmon had a recorder on the table. He asked permission to use it. Emma nodded. "Tell me what happened yesterday," he said. Emma told him. She told him about Maria's phone call, about driving to the courthouse, about the judge's reaction to her medal, about the admiral's arrival. She told him about Danny's service, about his injuries, about the system that had failed him at every turn. She told him about the bar, the arrest, the lies, and the councilman's son. She told him everything except the part about Marcus Webb. That story belonged to her, and she wasn't ready to give it to the world. Harmon listened without interrupting. When she finished, he turned off the recorder and looked at her for a long moment. "Off the record," he said, "I've been a journalist for 27 years. I've covered wars, elections, scandals, disasters, and I have never sat across from anyone like you. I'm not anyone special, Mr. Harmon. With respect, ma'am, that's the most wrong thing you've said all morning." The story ran at noon. Front page, above the fold, both print and digital. Harmon had done exactly what Emma asked. He wrote it as Danny's story, not hers. The headline read, "Marine veteran wrongly arrested after councilman's son started bar fight. Footage shows." Emma's name appeared in the third paragraph. The Medal of Honor was mentioned in the fifth. But the focus was where it belonged, on a broken man who had been chewed up by a system that was supposed to protect him. By 1 o'clock, the story had been picked up by the Associated Press. By 2, it was on every major news network. By 3, the Norfolk Police Department issued a statement saying they were reviewing the arrest of Daniel Ruiz. By 3:30, the DA's office announced that all charges against Danny had been dropped. Sarah called Danny at 3:45. He was sitting in Dr. Whitfield's waiting room at the Naval Medical Center in Portsmouth. He had driven there that morning, the way Emma told him to, the way he promised he would. "Danny, the charges are dropped, all of them. It's over." Danny pressed the phone against his ear. He was sitting in a plastic chair next to a water cooler, surrounded by other veterans, some in wheelchairs, some with service dogs, all of them waiting for their names to be called. "Say that again," Danny whispered. "The charges are dropped. The DA reviewed the footage. They have no case. You're free, Danny, completely free." Danny bent forward in his chair. He pressed his free hand against his forehead and squeezed his eyes shut. The veteran sitting next to him, a woman in her 40s with a prosthetic left leg, glanced over and recognized what she was seeing. She put her hand on his shoulder. Not a grab, not a threat, just a hand, steady and warm. He didn't flinch. "Thank you," Danny said into the phone. "Thank you, Sarah." "Don't thank me. Thank Emma. Thank the Admiral. Thank Chris Mallory, who had every reason to keep lying and chose not to. And Danny, Dr. Whitfield is expecting you. Don't leave that waiting room. I'm not going anywhere." At 4 o'clock, Patrick Brennan held a press conference outside his home. He stood at a podium with his attorney David Park beside him and denied everything. He denied knowing about the bar fight. He denied instructing anyone to lie. He denied any connection to Kelly's bar through Granby Holdings. He called the allegations politically motivated and said his family was being targeted because of his public service. The press conference lasted 11 minutes. It was the worst 11 minutes of Patrick Brennan's career. Because at 4:12, right as Brennan was finishing his statement, a reporter in the back row raised her hand and said, "Councilman Brennan, can you explain why your attorney David Park called the bartender at Kelly's last night at 11:47 p.m. and instructed him to destroy the security footage?" Brennan's face went white. He turned to Park. Park looked like a man who had just stepped on a landmine. "That question is based on false information," Park said. "I have the phone records," the reporter said. "Would you like to see them?" Brennan walked away from the podium without another word. Park followed. 3 cameras caught the moment. By 5 o'clock, that footage was everywhere. By 6 o'clock, the Norfolk City Council released a statement announcing that Councilman Patrick Brennan had been placed on administrative leave pending an internal investigation. By 7, the Virginia State Bar opened an ethics inquiry into David Park. By 8, the Norfolk Police Department's Internal Affairs Division announced a review of all cases involving Tyler Brennan. Jessica Torres arrived in Norfolk at 4:30 that afternoon. She drove 3 hours from Richmond with a bag packed for 2 days and a folder full of documents she had kept for over a year. Police reports, medical records, text messages, everything she had saved because some part of her always knew that someday someone would ask. Sarah met her at the public defender's office. Jessica was thin, quiet, and visibly nervous. She sat in Sarah's office clutching the folder against her chest. And when Sarah asked her if she was sure she wanted to do this, Jessica said, "That woman in the courtroom, the one with the medal, she didn't back down. If she can do that, I can do this." Sarah took the folder. She opened it. She read every page. And when she was done, she looked at Jessica Torres and said, "You are incredibly brave, and we are going to make sure this never happens to anyone else." Jessica Torres' statement was filed with the Norfolk Police Department at 6:15 p.m. Kevin Marsh, the victim from Tyler Brennan's first assault 2 years earlier, was contacted the same evening. He agreed to give a new statement. The pattern was no longer a rumor, it was a case. Emma didn't watch the news that night. She went to work. She clocked in at 7, put on a fresh pair of scrubs, and pinned the Medal of Honor to her chest. The charge nurse looked at it but didn't say a word. 2 of her fellow nurses stopped her in the hallway. One hugged her. The other just said, "We had no idea, Emma." She nodded and kept walking. At 8:45, she was checking the vitals of a patient in room 312 when her phone vibrated. She pulled it out and saw a text from Admiral Callahan. NCIS just opened a formal investigation into Patrick Brennan, not just for Danny's case, for all of it. Obstruction, witness tampering, corruption. This is going federal, Emma. You started something that can't be stopped. She read it. She put the phone back in her pocket. She looked at her patient, a 68-year-old veteran named Arthur Phelps, who was recovering from pneumonia and had been telling her stories about his time in Korea for the past 3 days. "Everything okay, sweetheart?" Arthur asked. "Everything's fine, Arthur. How's your breathing?" "Better. You know what helped? That story on the news, about the nurse with the medal. You see that?" Emma adjusted his IV without looking up. "I heard something about it. They say she carried 3 Marines out of a firefight, got shot 3 times and kept going. Can you imagine that? 3 times. That's something," Emma said. Arthur studied her face. Then he looked at the medal on her scrubs. Then he looked back at her face. His eyes widened. "Lord have mercy," he whispered. "That's you." Emma met his eyes. She didn't confirm it. She didn't deny it. She just squeezed his hand once and said, "Get some rest, Arthur. I'll check on you in an hour." She walked out of the room. Arthur Phelps stared after her with his mouth open, and then he did something he hadn't done in 40 years. He saluted. From his hospital bed, with his IV trailing from his arm, a 70-year-old Korean War veteran raised his hand and held it at his brow until she disappeared around the corner. 3 weeks later, Danny Ruiz sat in Dr. Whitfield's office for his 4th session. He was sleeping better. Not well, but better. He was eating real meals. He had moved into transitional housing provided by the SEAL Family Foundation. He had a case manager named Linda who called him every Monday to check in. He had a therapist who listened. He had a future that looked different from the one he had been staring at in that bar. "I want to do something," Danny told Dr. Whitfield, "for other vets, guys like me, guys who fell through the cracks." "What kind of something?" "I don't know yet. Maybe a support group, maybe a hotline. Something so that the next guy sitting alone at a bar at midnight knows there's someone to call." Dr. Whitfield leaned back. "That sounds like a purpose, Danny." "Yeah, I think it is." He called Emma that night. She was on her couch eating leftover pasta, watching nothing on television. She picked up on the second ring. "I want to start something," Danny said. "For veterans, a support line. Somewhere guys can call when they're at the bottom and don't know who to reach." Emma set down her fork. "Tell me more." He told her. He talked for 20 minutes straight, the most words she had heard him string together since the day he was wounded. He had ideas. He had energy. He had the kind of fire in his voice that she hadn't heard since before the ambush, since before the war took everything from him and left him trying to rebuild with nothing but broken parts. When he finished, Emma said, "I'm in." Just like that? Just like that. Danny laughed, a real laugh, full and warm and alive. "You know what? I believe you." "You should. I don't say things I don't mean. You know that." "Yeah, I do." "Hey, Emma." "Yeah?" "I'm going to name it after him, the support line. I'm going to call it the web line, for Marcus." Emma's breath caught. She pressed her hand to her chest, right over the spot where the metal usually sat. Her eyes burned. Her throat closed. She opened her mouth and nothing came out for a long moment. "Danny," she finally managed. "He would have loved that." "I know, that's why I'm doing it." 6 months later, the web line launched. Danny ran it out of a small office donated by the SEAL Family Foundation. He started with one phone and one chair and 12 hours a day. Within a month, he had 3 volunteers. Within 3 months, he had 20. Within 6 months, the web line was receiving over 200 calls a week from veterans across Virginia. Patrick Brennan was indicted on 4 counts of obstruction of justice and 2 counts of witness tampering. David Park was disbarred. Tyler Brennan pled guilty to 2 counts of assault and received 18 months of probation and mandatory anger management. Jessica Torres returned to Norfolk and filed a civil suit against the Brennan family. Kevin Marsh joined her. The cases are still pending. Judge Harold Kessler was not removed from the bench, but the Judicial Review Board issued a formal censure, the first in Norfolk County in over a decade. 3 months after the courtroom incident, Kessler voluntarily enrolled in a training program for judges on military cultural competency. Whether it changed him, nobody could say. But the attorneys in Norfolk noticed something. He was quieter. He interrupted less. He listened more. And he never again questioned a medal without asking first. Admiral Thomas Callahan retired from active duty 8 months after the courtroom incident. At his retirement ceremony at the Pentagon, he gave a short speech that mentioned no battles, no operations, no classified missions. He talked about a nurse. He talked about a Marine. He talked about a courtroom. And he said that in 40 years of service, the proudest moment of his career was not any medal he had received or any mission he had completed. It was driving through traffic from the Pentagon to a county courthouse in Norfolk, Virginia, to stand beside someone who had earned the right to never stand alone. Sarah Chen was promoted to senior public defender within the year. She never took a plea deal without reviewing the evidence first. She never walked into a courtroom unprepared again, and she kept a photograph on her desk of a woman in scrubs wearing a Medal of Honor, not because she needed inspiration, but because she never wanted to forget what courage looked like when it was quiet. Emma Colton went back to work the day after the story broke, and the day after that, and the day after that. She didn't give interviews. She didn't write a book. She didn't go on television. She continued to show up at Norfolk General Hospital every morning at 7, wearing her scrubs and her steady hands and the calm, unshakable presence that made her patients feel safe. She wore the Medal of Honor every day, not because she needed people to see it, not because she wanted recognition. She wore it because a young Marine named Marcus Webb gave his life in her arms on a helicopter over Afghanistan, and as long as she was breathing, she would carry his memory where the world could see it. One evening, about a year after everything happened, Emma sat on the edge of her bed at 4 in the morning, the way she always did. She held a cup of black coffee. The apartment was quiet. Her phone sat on the nightstand, silent for once. No reporters, no phone calls, no emergencies. She reached over and opened the top drawer of her dresser. The velvet box was still there, but she didn't need it anymore. The medal was already pinned to the jacket hanging on the back of her door, ready for another day. She sipped her coffee. She closed her eyes, and for the first time in 10 years, the face she saw behind her eyelids wasn't Marcus Webb dying. It was Marcus Webb smiling. The way he smiled before the ambush. The way he smiled when he didn't know what was coming. Young and alive, and full of the kind of hope that war takes from you if you let it. She didn't let it. Emma Colton opened her eyes. She finished her coffee. She stood up, got dressed, and walked out the door into the early morning darkness, the same way she had done 1,000 times before. She had patience waiting. She had a life to live. She had a Marine's memory to honor, and a promise she had made to herself a long time ago in the dirt of Helmand Province. A promise that she would never stop showing up, never stop fighting, never stop carrying the people who couldn't carry themselves. Some people are born heroes. Some people become heroes in a single moment of extraordinary courage. And some people, the rarest kind, choose to be heroes every single day, in quiet ways that the world never sees. In hospital rooms, in courthouses, in diners, in parking lots. In phone calls at 6:30 in the morning, and drives across town in old Honda Civics with dented doors. Emma Colton was that kind of hero. She always had been. She always would be. And the Iron Widow never needed anyone to know.